Mine's duly.
All right, let's go ahead and get this show on the road. Today is January 30th, 2023. This is a work session to go over the 2023 proposed budget. It is 6:02 p.m. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, with really no agenda on the books, we're going to have the mayor speak along with department heads. So Mayor, it's all yours.
All right, thank you very much. Before we get into this, I want to talk about two questions that came up. First one was from Councilman Jaber last week. You asked when we went over the budget for this building, if there's anything for the annex next door. There's nothing earmarked for that building. If something were to happen over there, the money would kind of be spread over there. We're continuing the evaluation program and process for that building, renovation cost and things like that. So just to kind of give you an update. Weren't really sure what you were asking, but there's nothing earmarked for that building.
Thank you.
And then Councilwoman Fry asked me about, it's tab 7, page 138. Forest City Barberton capital projects. So Forest City was the developer of the original phases of New Haven. They went under, filed bankruptcy. Prior to that, or along with that, the city had we negotiated a settlement with them because there were things that were not done in the older section, I'll call it the older section of New Haven. So we had a settlement of $100,000. There remains $22,000 in that fund. It can only be used for certain things in the older section of New Haven. So, as you can see, we budgeted to use the entire $22,000 this year. Myself and Mr. Shreve have met with the Homeowners Association of the older section, not the newer section, and talked about, the streets. We've talked about the curbs. We've talked about a lot of their concerns, the street signs and things like that. So we wanted to budget the full amount because we're looking into the cost of changing out some of the street signs that have rotted away. If you've been up there, the street signs are wood. The streets need repaved. So $22,000 is not going to get us everything, but we're looking into it. Plus, we don't want to repave if they're still building. You repave the street, you're still sending concrete trucks down these newly paved streets, so we're cognizant of that. But Councilwoman Fry had asked about that, and there's a little history that goes along with it, so wanted to answer that question on the floor here.
Thank you.
But we have met with the Homeowners Association twice, and we'll continue to meet with them as we move forward with this. So, any questions on that? Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Incravati. He's going to go over the funds that the courts oversee. And if you remember from last year, there's a lot of state rules and laws that overshadow or run how these funds can be used. So Mr. Incravati will go over that with you guys.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Good evening. I will say, so I've done this a handful of times, and I remember the last few times I'll stand up here and I'll just start rattling off my fund numbers as to which ones they are, and you guys will look at me like, well, what page is that? And I didn't know what page, right? Because when I'm printing it off, I didn't print off ones that came with the book. And Jeremy's been giving me the book every year, but this time I actually used it, flipped through. I said, oh, there are pages, so there are page numbers. So this should go smoother. As the mayor indicated, we generally operate out of two areas. We've got 101 general fund monies, and then we have a fair amount of special fund monies that are generated with the court operation or grants that come in and then spend through those, and those are separate into different accounts too, so we'll certainly review each one of those. And would start with, I gather, the 101 accounts, which is what, tab 4? And our first one looks like it's page 48. And so in our general fund 101 municipal court budget generally includes the judges' salaries, which is a portion of, right? The judges' salaries are paid through the state and through the city. There are a couple different funds and of course that contribute to the judges' salaries in total. And so we generally budget that $80,000 amount and come in around 75. That's fixed by statute and then really kind of doesn't change until the legislature of the state of Ohio changes it for municipal judges. So that will stay the same each and every year. Then underneath that, bailiff salaries, I would draw your attention to a change in some numbers here. What we had in 2022, the bailiff salaries included the court security officers that you see down there at line 116. We broke that apart. Our court security officers, they are armed security for this floor. They're part-time guys, right? They're generally, actually both of them now happen to be retired sheriff deputies, and they maintain a commission through the sheriff, but they're paid part-time. And previous years, you know, they've been lumped into the bailiff's salaries. And so just, I think for clarity, we've moved them out of there. So you'll see a drop in the amount actually that the bailiff salaries is budgeted for, but that is really balanced off when you look at the new entry then for court security officers. So those items are paid through those two lines now instead of one. I think that's a little clearer. Our bailiff salaries include the two judicial bailiffs, and it includes our outside service bailiff that handle the service of process, that handle the putouts, that handle immobilizations. He does an awful lot of running around there. The rest is just the related payroll expenses that you normally see. So from the court 101 account, the training and travel budget amount we've asked for is reflecting a little bit more of a return to in-person meetings, right? If you look historically, we dropped significantly through the COVID years where you just didn't do the training on site, it was done virtually. So we anticipate those kind of resuming. In fact, they have through this calendar year already, and picked up a little bit last year in the calendar year. You'll see a reflection of that in the 2022 actual expenditures. Then the rest are some smaller amounts that we attribute for some smaller office supplies. We did bump up the motor vehicle maintenance. I would draw your attention there because we're going to get to that a little bit when we get to our 209 court operations fund. There's a request in there for something a little different. But our service bailiff, so what vehicle do we use? The service bailiff uses a vehicle to run around and do the immobilizations, to do the services, to do the putouts. And that vehicle is getting real long in the tooth, and I've spent more and more the last few years, and this year last especially, on trying to service and keep that going. So we're going to ask you to take a look in 209 to the purchase of another vehicle. So I guess I would stop at that point and ask you if you have any questions on this 101 account. Yes, sir.
For the judge's salary, this is just curiosity here. It seems to stay at 75,000, and we budget for 80 constantly. I do see in 2019 there was 75,741. Is there a reason why we over budget on that?
Well, and honestly, no. Other than when I first sat down here and started this 7 years ago, I saw that number at 96,000. Budgeted, right? And sat down and talked with the mayor when we did a budget review. So why budgeting so high? And it really didn't need to be that high. Our request was like, well, if ever I was going to fall short on one budget line out of this whole thing, I didn't want it to be the judge's salary. So we kind of kept it there. That doesn't change. And in fact, you know, there was a recent, you don't care so much about this, but there was a recent increase in the budgets in the judge's salary, and I thought I missed it. You know, when we put our budget together, I did not change it. It was completely borne by the state of Ohio. Whenever does that happen, right? So it just doesn't, but ultimately it is. So there is a little bit of flexibility there. I just, you know, if there's extra, sure, it falls back into the 101 general, right? It stays with you all and doesn't get expended. It's just a bit of a safety measure, but it really shouldn't change.
Thank you.
Any other questions with regard to that particular one? Our next 101 general would be the probation department. And they're buried a little further into page 68. And so here you'll see 3 probation officer salaries, one of which we did bump, a request to bump. because we're trying to retain good people. I've got a probation officer, our chief probation officer has been here for a number of years. She's looking at, although keep trying to hold her off, looking at a retirement coming up in a few years, if you will, but there's got to be someone to take over that helm. We've got someone on board, and we're actually really two young women that do a wonderful job. One has an eye towards maybe taking that role, and we'd like to retain them as they, and as you'll hear when we get to the 208 account, or 208 account, they provide invaluable service. We rely on our probation department immensely because we just don't have jail space, right? The Summit County Jail isn't taking prisoners for us. You know, we're scrambling, and with the good graces of the chief, occasionally get somebody downstairs in timeout for a little bit. But beyond that, you know, we look towards alternative types of sanctions, and that is all run through the probation department. They do the scheduling, they do the hookup, they do the monitoring, and they are vital for our operation now based on the current system of the way we handle the participants in the court. So we've got someone we'd like to keep, and I think we're getting closer to bringing that salary in line. If you do some comparisons, they're still on the lower end, but that's kind of the nature of the business here, and they understand. So those are the three adjustments there. We don't really use a part-time secretary. The rest are just the payroll expenses as lined out by the budget requests. And then really not much else there. If you look down operation and maintenance, not out of the 101 count other than the telephone and the copier lease. We tend to operate and try to operate the probation department as much as possible in a state operation out of its 208 account. All right, so if you guys have questions here on this 101, I'll certainly answer them now, but otherwise I think I'd take you to 208, which is our first special fund. Yes, sir.
Thank you. With the county not taking any of our prisoners, you said the probation office takes on the bulk of alternative sentencings. Does the county reimburse us any money towards that since they are refusing our inmates?
No, and I guess perhaps overstated. They've gotten better at this, at taking our individuals, right, that are charged initially, and then maybe they run off to CASC, an Oriana facility, an inpatient, like an in-house, if you will, something they can walk away from, but training them there. They will at least take our prisoners. The chief would tell you on several occasions, get an officer out there transporting a defendant to the jail to actually be booked into the jail and turned away at the door. And now you've got a resource of an officer sitting there that can't know what to do with an individual in the back of his cruiser. That has been, and really under the threat of suit, unfortunately, been much better within the last year. They will at least take them, book them in, and then potentially transfer to CASC. What does happen, and where you will see us getting money to participate in these programs and to place participants into programs, is in the IDAT funds and in the special project funds out of special services, if you will, professional services from the probation department fund. So from 208, so it's kind of self-funded. So we don't really rely on the city, if you will, to go ahead and pay for any of that. It's going to be funded either by probation service fees or some of the special fees that we do get, IDAT and IDIOM, which we'll talk right about at the end. I can use those funds, and we'll give you a little bit of a story as we get to that. But ultimately, yeah, they're going to be in-house funds that are going to come later in our special project funds. Did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Additionals? Okay. Well, then we'll get into those special project funds. And the first one to that is the probation one. So our 208 fund, and that sits on page 93, if I'm getting this right, yeah. As you're flipping there, I'll say, it's funded by, well, I'll go easy and say two primary sources. First are supervision fees that come in, all right? And those are fees paid by participants for their programming, right? So as you ask about where do the costs come, or where does the money come for some of the programming, the participant fees and the supervision fees, they come in and are applied towards the operation of the probation department. The others that you see more towards the top there in the revenue are OMAS monies, right? Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Service monies. So up at the top of 93, you'll see we get grant monies for two primary purposes. Our specialized docket courts. We maintain a specialized docket drug court, and we maintain a specialized docket mental health court. And they based on the participant numbers, we qualify for grants for those, and we get that as an annual basis on the state fiscal year, which they generally roll in towards the halfway point. So you'll see that those are the revenue sources on it. From that, we do pay, and there was a change. I'll direct your attention to probation secretary, and finance for us has changed that it really is our 4th probation officer now. So if you're seeing a probation secretary at that rate, that really is our probation officer, our 4th, our youngest. She is doing a wonderful job now too, and someone else we'd like to keep. So we're trying to get her salary up into a spot where it's comparable and that they don't go wandering off on us after we get them trained. Questions with regard to that expenditure? Not so much on personnel. When you get into operations and maintenance, that's where we start seeing some more of those. Probation, travel, and training, we look to hopefully get that up and again because haven't used it in the past, but these newer young women, we want to get them to some of these programs that are available for training to them. And then the rest, you'll see the professional services. So that's going to be money that's expended towards Summit Psych and some of the programming that you have through Summit Psych and the coming in here and doing assessments, and then some of the programming that's handled through Oriana House when we get billed back on that. Now, kind of the nice thing, although it's nice from the bottom end, it drives our probation officer crazy who's handling a lot of that payment, because what will happen is out through Oriana House, they will first set them down and they will process or see if they qualify for Medicaid, right? So often we will send them off for programming. And if it is therapeutic type programming and assessment type programming, things of that nature through an Oriana House program, if ultimately they qualify for Medicaid, they're going to take payment through the Medicaid service and not come back around and bill us in again. So we actually get a good bit more service out of it than that number reflects. But you'll see it's a fair portion of what we do out of the operations and maintenance probation department is the professional services. So that's pretty much where most of that goes. The bottom numbers, whatever we budget coming in, whatever Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services tells us we're getting annually, we expend that annually. All right, so with that, again, goes towards the specialized docket courts, and it's used specifically for participants that are in the specialized docket courts. Recovery treatment, recovery coaches, assessments, and some in-community recovery assistance, right? If they are behind on certain things, if they need help with utilities, if they need help with living expenses, and they're participating well within our docket, we can use that OMAS money for that type of support, which helps out, right? They report to us regularly, they attend regularly in these sessions, and if they are doing well, then it's a good bet for us to go ahead and use that grant money to help support them here locally in the community. So we look to expend that in its entirety as it's awarded to us. Any questions on probation account? I'd run then to 209, which is the court special projects operations. That's our general in and out operations. Out of that, the magistrate, you see it's funded basically, again, by dispositive motions or civil motions, civil matters. The criminal and traffic cases are court costs, and so it's funded through both of those. And then from there, we handle the magistrate. We have a full-time magistrate, I think, as you all know. That is a 60-40 split with the county. So we split that with the county on all of those, the payroll costs as well as the salary itself. So that is shared with the county. And then we're really just down to professional services that we use in the operation of the court. And office supplies, we really try to roll that out of our 208 account instead of the 101. And then finally, I think as you all see, the general fund reimbursement, we annually give $450,000 give. We by journal entry each month return a total of $450,000 over the year to the city for the court operation. Oh, and there's our extra one, the capital outlay, equipment and furnishings. We are not the best time to go out buying used vehicles, but it's moderating a bit, so we're optimistic it does. We're asking for that $30,000 to be budgeted for us to acquire a replacement vehicle for our service bailiff. Expenses are such that it is becoming a maintenance issue. It's rusting where I'm getting spots where I can't repair it. I'm hearing from Karen and Dave's. So we're at a spot where it generally needs replaced. Now, we're mindful of the current market and want to be smart about it. It does seem to be moderating a bit, and that's good, but it's something that if we can come across it during the course of this year, come across a good deal, we do seek to replace that vehicle. Doing that, if you take a look at the income and then the expenditures, we're going to dip into a little bit to our reserves to do it. But it's definitely needed at this time if we can do it reasonably. So questions on that particular fund? Yes, sir.
The 30,000 is leasing an option, or are you looking to buy outright?
It isn't. It's a buyout. It's an excellent question, but the mileage is what's going to run us there, because we're doing immobilizations, which are just basically your clubs, or you're going to run off and put a guardian interlock on it. You're going to, a lot of the stuff is local, but boy, we could have somebody rumble through here from Cadiz, Ohio, or down to Steubenville, and we got to go to immobilize a vehicle down there, right? So the mileage does tend to get high on them. So we're at the best spot. And I don't want to say that our service bailiff is rough on the vehicle. Actually, he's not. But I hate to turn it back in and see what I've got on at a lease end thing. But it's an excellent idea. It's just isn't going to fit for us. The issue is just now really trying to find one in a market that's going to be reasonable for a used vehicle purchase. So,
Thank you.
anything else? Okay, thank you. Where we go, 210? So 210 is a bit of a misnomer. It's this court computer fund. It's driven by statute, and actually all of these are, by the way. These are all driven by statute. Everyone I'm covering here right now is driven by statute. The court computer fund is really the clerk computer fund. It comes out of the same statute, and there's one section that says, the first section, A section, says for the efficient operation and computerization of the clerk of court, you may charge up to, and it's a 20, something of that nature, $10. So that's where that is funded for. It is for the clerk of courts, all right? And that is essentially for the computerization of the court. Now, it's used as we go through and budget the income. Again, it's all generated by fees that are attached to each case. There are some for the IT administration, which are local hands-on. We've got she's got some individuals that work in her office. One in particular, Katie, that handles the Henshin, the software court management program. She does a lot of that computerization, and then we also help from the court side with her computerization. So you'll see a system admin 1 and 2 kick in, and then on the second page, which rolls over to page 96. You'll see a fair bit of that for professional services. We budget $350,000 and generally do that every year and just essentially spend a fraction of it. That is directed towards the case management system, and we currently use a company called Henshin, and I'll say more specifically Diana does. It's her call. She uses a company called Henshin. It's out of Cincinnati, and if you've ever seen the interface, it's an antiquated interface, right? But it does what it needs to do. And we don't spend an awful lot, maybe just over 5 figures on annual support fees and everything, where if she decides to change, we've looked at Pioneer, you look at CourtView, you see some of the slicker ones, right? They are national companies based out of California, something of that nature, where you're going to drop at $350,000 just in licensing purchases and install and setup, and then you've got difficulty in trying to work with them in an Ohio situation. When Stowe, to pick on them, when they picked it up, they went with CourtView, went to go see it, took a look at it, and said, we had to enter the entire Ohio revised code because California didn't really care to enter the state of Ohio's code. So right now we budget this. It can be used towards anything towards the computerization of the clerk. She's dipped in a little bit more to it for good cause to do some scanning, imaging, allowing us to say really shred and destroy some files. And that's helped in storage. So we've been able to reduce the amount of physical storage that we got. She is by statute required to keep physical files of a certain type for a certain period of time, but once we're outside of that, we've been digitizing, and that's been helping there too. The rest are just smaller equipment, right? So you've got a $30,000 request out there for small equipment and supplies, for example. If we get to a spot where machines need updated, right, individual workstations need updated, then ultimately those funds would come from that source, and we would replace the computers with that. Are there questions with their 210, the clerk fund? Okay. We'll jump you over to the buildings, which is 211. That sits relatively undisturbed, right? There's been a lot of talk about what is happening with the buildings or what's going forward. If you look to 211, That basically is a fund that generates $200,000 to $225,000 annually. It has basically been a savings account where we sat now close to $3 million to put towards, in whatever fashion it may come to be, the improvement, the move, whatever that might be, right? When the fund was started, who knows? It's going to be a new building. Is it a new building or is it an addition to a building? So those funds are there for that purpose. And they're budgeted there each year, $1 million to cover what might come. Of course, by the time anything really gets expended, it comes before council and the project is here, it's reviewed, it's vetted. So it's just a matter of getting it into a line item right now to see what may happen as the future comes. The other thing, out of that 225, 25 of that generally is us splitting the court security, well, we'll say building security, right? Your metal detectors staffed by Royce, used to be Tenable. That's a contract that runs just under $50,000 every year, and we split that equally with the city, so that 25 essentially is eaten up by that. There are questions on the building fund? Okay. If I just keep talking, y'all just get bored. It's like, look, please, just wrap. Okay, so I have 214, and that's on page 99. We're back to computer funds. So when Diana gets X number of dollars, call it 20 per case, for her clerk computerization, the court can get 3. So we have $3 per case that goes to a court computerization and legal research, all right? So you'll see our figure there for legal research. LexisNexis Advanced serves us well. We continue to stay with them, and that's pretty much a spot on line there for what we spend annually for LexisNexis. Then the rest is wherever we do need computerization help. Now, some of the stuff that you see that we did over the last couple of years were grants from the Supreme Court. That was appreciated. But then just the same kind of thing. Do computers need updated? What are we doing technology-wise that we could then spend out of that 214 account? Questions there? All right, then I will finish, and I appreciate your time. I'll finish with the 220 count, excuse me, page 102. That's IDAT and idiom, and it is money from, essentially, it's OBI cases, right? And it cuts back to us in 2 ways. So that money is collected by Diana on OBI cases, is sent to the state of Ohio, and then is returned back to us from the state of Ohio for 2 specific purposes. IDAT is for the Indigent Drivers Alcohol Treatment. That's what IDAT stands for. And it's for very certain specific limited purposes for indigent individuals charged with alcohol driving offenses, right? So then we can use it for certain things, but not for other things. So that's IDAT. You'll see that line there. Idiom is the Indigent Drivers Immobilization, all right? So when we talked about, well, this car needs immobilized, or this needs some sort of tracking system or guardian interlock system, and the individual is indigent, then this fund can be used to pay for those. It can be used for treatment, it can be used for transportation for the individual, but it's got to be someone that is indigent and charged with an OBI offense. And it had been that way for years, and that fund kept building and building, and I couldn't touch it except for just those reasons. So luckily, last year, about 18 months ago, the legislature changed this, and they have now allowed you to declare a surplus in your funds, which clearly we've been running a surplus on it, and now put it into an IDAT surplus fund. And you'll see that number down there. And that number has grown. If you look historically in the budget, that number has grown, because now I can take that and I can use that for any indigent individual with any criminal offense where alcohol is an underlying factor. So now I'm outside of the OBI realm. I can use any criminal offenses charged inside of here, and now I can use that for their treatment, training, that type of thing, travel, if they need that. So it's opened up the door for us. And when we talked about a little bit about where's the money coming from, are we paying for it? Finally I'm at a spot, especially with this fund, at a spot where I can use that money to go ahead and pay for those indigent individuals that need funds for treatment and travel and things associated with their case to kind of help them out, and it doesn't rely on the city. So that's where we've kind of started to see that number increase a little bit and using it more, which is very helpful, because it just sat there and we couldn't use it for the longest time. I'm done. Any questions? You guys have anything on any one of the things we talked about? All right. Well, again, I appreciate your patience going through it, and it's certainly available for questions. You know where to find me around the corner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm going to have Jamie come up and talk about HR and safety for the next 2.
No. Hi, Erica. Okay.
Hi.
All right, I'm going to start off on page 52. I'm going to do civil service first.
Fifty-two, four, maybe?
Okay. You do see quite a change. I decided for, this budget that I wanted to have the funds come out of the professional services. You'll see I moved, let me make sure I have the right. Yeah, service. Okay. I put more money into the civil service budget for this year because I have two budgets. I have civil service and HR, and sometimes they can be, some would come out of HR, some would come out of civil service. And this time I wanted anything in terms of getting ready for a civil service exam to come solely out of here. So I estimated, I'm figuring about 14 exams this year, 4 of them being promotional. And the promotional ones are the ones that are the most costly. So to account for that, we do have an increase, but I will not be using any of that money out of the HR budget. And what that includes is the fee to create the exams, the buying the exams, doing the advertising. And advertising is going to be even probably more this year since we don't have the Herald. So that's really the only change. Everything else is pretty much the same as the year prior. Any questions? On to page 55, the safety director budget. Everything is a slight increase. The only thing up a little more, training and travel. I wanted to have a little bit more money for myself to have for training. And the Swisscom dispatch contract, just preparing for that and having a slight increase in there. And everything else is the standard. Did some more in advertising. That was about it. Yes.
Thank you. This between you and the mayor, I remember last year there was an argument with Swisscom and fees. Did that ever get resolved between the members?
Yeah, the cost formula has stayed the same. We're still discussing if there's going to be any changes or not, but for now, the formula stayed the same.
Thank you.
Your advertising, does that still come out of service? Do you have a line item for your account? Because you said advertising, but I don't see anything under safety or under.
I do it under civil service.
Civil service.
Unless it's unless it happens to be a non-classified job, an unclassified, then that would come out of HR. So this is only civil service, would only be for classified positions.
But you use professional services for the advertisement, is what I'm saying.
Not in safety, no.
Okay. $1,000 probably won't go very far.
No. Any other questions on that one? Page 56 for human resources. I did a cutout from professional services. I wanted to start taking that from the employee examination line item because that's what they are. We do examinations post for conditional and job offers, meaning psychological, polygraphs, physicals, driving abstracts and things like that will come out of employee examinations. Professional services, about the same. I took about 18,000 of that and moved it down to employee examinations, but still want to keep the professional services at that amount because I don't know what advertising is going to be like. Any questions? Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Chief Warborough talk about the police department. Olaf?
We'll start on page 62 of the police department. So it says their general fund, police department's funded out of the general fund. Police wages, contractual for the most part, so. Administrative assistant, it's Jackie. They're fairly self-explanatory. School patrol, we're reimbursed with that through the schools. So we do it, administer it, and then they pay us back to keep the kids safe going to school. Diversion specialist, that's a grant. The benefits funds, those all come from, numbers come from Finance Director Flaker, for citywide, so their percentages off of wages. Retired employee benefits, that was taken out of a contract, but it's grandfathered in for some of the older guys, so as they pass on, there'll be less of that, unfortunately. Clothing allowance, that's contractual. Gym membership's contractual. Operations and maintenance, train travel, what it is, chief training travel, go to some conferences, professional training, things that we absolutely have to have that are mandated. That's kind of a mandated line item for several things. Notary training, the research on various things. Dog impounding, we pay for that. If we have to keep a dog any length of time. We try to get it that through the court then to say, hey, we kept this dog that bit some, buddy on, say, Haven or somewhere. So, so we have to keep that dog for a while. And then the county charges us, and then we say, hey, Judge McKinney, would you try to make him pay it back? But, that doesn't always generally happen. So that's why that's there. Web ID, that's what we do the fingerprinting downstairs. Leads, that's a expense that we pay for the state to maintain the system. A lot of these are systems type of things. Car wash contract, we go to Pettit's. Repair and maintenance, that's when things break, an air conditioning unit. Todd will say, hey, the AC broke in the building. You got any money to toss towards, a pump or something? So we've used that a fair amount. So we do our part. Copiers, autos, you guys have homes and you understand that. Memberships in different organizations, SRO, Ohio Tactical Officer Association, office supplies, equipment maintenance contracts. That's one of our bigger ones. That's where a lot of stuff like body cams come out of. So, range supplies, bullets, ammo, targets. Dare supplies, that's stuff they call it dare supplies, but it's always just been called that. So, some stickers and some, things for kids, but promotional materials. So, motor maintenance, that's for the vehicles. Minor equipment replacement, what it says. Uniforms for new hires, reserves, bulletproof vest. We get a lot of that's back on a grant. We get a grant for that. Bike patrol. We don't have a K-9 right now, so that's not funded. Gas and oil, keep the cars rolling. Radio maintenance, that's our fees that we pay to the county for our monthly, yearly, radio stuff. Jail operations, pretty standard. Prisoner medical, we try not to pay any prisoner medical stuff, so. Postage, that's gone up a lot. Actually, I saw it's going up again, first class, so. We still do a lot through mail, certified stuff, and investigative funds. So, detective bureau items and stuff like that. Equipment, on the next page actually, 64, equipment and furnishings. Try to keep up the department as best we can. We need some carpet, we're trying to, what are we gonna do, in the future, so. But there's some things we need to do. Also, that'll help outfit, cars along the way too. New computers and things like that. Vehicles, that's 2 vehicles in there, so. And that's it. You know, last year we used 96% of our budget, so 91% is personnel, 9% is operating, so.
Thanks, sir. Over K-9 unit, is there a reason why we're not moving forward with that?
It's expensive.
That's a, you get a cost at all on that, or?
Oh, yeah, you need a new car, for one, because they have to have their own car.
Right.
So
Have
you
you
have to outfit that car.
Have you ever done any kind of work on, see how much the cost would be if we
Yeah,
went
we
to-
know how much it would be, probably to start it up, and you have ongoing costs too. So,
And something that you guys don't want to do at all?
well, right now we're in flux too with, you know, there's a lot of things. One's personnel, 2, it's cost and equipment. 3, weed's probably gonna be legal here. So do you train a dog to smell weed? Which you probably would want to right now because it's still illegal, but then you can't untrain a dog if weed becomes legal. So then you have a dog that you really can't use because it's gonna hit on an item that's legal. So we're in that, I don't know, kind of weird world that, you know, how do you train them, you know, so that's part of it too, so. What else? Yeah, so. Mr. Darren, sorry, you were next.
Yeah, I was just curious about the phone for the fluctuation for the telephone.
I have no idea.
Where it went from
I've never.
80 to
I've
90
always-
to
That's always
5,000.
been a number assigned, you'd have to ask. I don't know how the telephone stuff
I mean,
goes.
yeah.
That's one of those internal costs that gets allocated that
Yeah.
you know, is beyond my
It dropped
world.
from
So,
95,000 to 5,000 actual. So that's why I was just. And then it's still budgeted for
that's
another.
your finance director back there. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I can talk on it a little bit. Part of it has to do with, about a year and a half ago or so, is when we switched from Windstream to Spectrum. And when we made that switch, it lowered the telephone bill by a lot of people dramatically. So there was a little bit of a time span where we were kind of paying both Windstream and Spectrum for telephones. And then we finally got off of Windstream completely, and like I said, it lowered the phone bills quite a bit. Because then we also when we did that, we also figured out, okay, what are the telephones to all the departments? And so we reallocated those costs too, because you gotta think, back in the day, where was the dispatch center? In the police department, so that's why the police telephone was always so high. So,
Thank you. I understand.
Yes.
Hopefully it stays where it's at.
Yeah.
Can you go back to, on page 62, the jailer
Sure.
reserve wages?
Yeah.
Why is that about half when we've been using double what budgeted
I
for the
think
past
that,
couple years?
well, it's between that 116 line and that 113 line. So we had dispatchers and jailers at the same time, for one. Then we
Okay.
always had reserves. When dispatch went to Swisscom, we kept going part-time jailers, but they kept coming out of the same old fund. And then reserves were taken out of that as well. So this is it's a reclassification by, you know, Mr. Flaker, just to make it more true as to where those funds are going to. Because if you look at past years, you would see that one line item, I forget which one probably, well, probably the 113 one, dispatcher jailer wages was zero because, and everything though was coming out of the other one, the two groups.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yes, Ms. Schreiber.
Thank you. The 125 for vehicles, you said that's for 2 vehicles?
Yeah, that's 2.
And how many are we still waiting on from previous?
4. We're waiting on 4 vehicles, so.
So do we expect, this might be for the mayor, do we expect those 4 this year possibly?
Yeah, no, I can answer that.
Oh.
Those will definitely be in this year. So, by May, I would like to think. That's what Chevy told us, and Chevy's pumping them out. So other departments are getting Chevys too, so.
So we're still down the 2 that were totaled.
Well, we went out and bought some used ones to stave us through for that. At the end of the year,
So
the
we were
mayor-
able to
the mayor,
replace
law
those.
director, finance director, safety director, were able to cobble some money. We bought 2 used ones to replace those.
So we got those two replaced.
We got those two, and
we
then the
potentially
four
could
is
have
the
six.
21 and 22 ones that were ordered but never came in. So that gets us back to normal, or, up to par, 2 a year replace, Like more, but, I mean, we get it,
So we could potentially get 6 this year.
Right. So the four should put us back to, par, and then 2 for 23 to keep going. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Ms. Bailey.
All right, Chief Iona was up next.
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
Starting on page 65 for the fire department. Just a little note under the budget that first number under firefighter wages should read 39,818,072. This is an old workbook that I sent in, so that's a correction there. And then the one underneath it for my administrative assistant should be 1,400 more on that one. Going through, life insurance, Medicare, OPERS, the pension, severance pay, the life insurance, clothing allowance, those are all pretty standard from the past years. Questions over any of those? Yes.
Could you repeat what the correction was for that first figure?
The first one should read 3,900,018,072.
Okay, so it was, I just changed the 9, but I thought there was more to it. Thank you.
Okay. Going on to page 66. Training and travel, we're going to require more training for our fire officers, especially for the newer lieutenants and that, they're required to have more knowledge when it comes to inspections. I need more of the officers to be fire instructors and EMS instructors. Currently, I'm the only EMS instructor there on the department, so we should probably have 3 or 4 of those. It is a hassle to try to find a class for them. They don't have a whole lot of them available for them. Professional services, we've had to update a lot of our technology. A good example is for rules and regulations, we use a system called Lexipol, just like the police department does. So every rule regulation is in digital, that it can be read at any time, anywhere. You can pull it up on your phone, an iPad, or anything like that. Our Lad Tech is a system that we use for scheduling. A lot of times, instead of having paper schedules or whatever, this is a scheduling system that can't be altered or anything. They can be at home, look at the schedule, and plan their vacations, time off. They could switch comp days with other people very easily with that. One of the bigger costs that we're going to have is the ESO. ESO is going to be our record management system. It will allow us to do EMS reports, fire reports. It will also allow the fire inspections to be done more efficiently, and we'll be able to keep track better of a lot of violations and working with the building with a lot of this system. The laundry service really hasn't changed that much. We still use it for sheets, towels, everything like that. Now, on our repair and maintenance, vehicles, I think we're going to stretch this as far as we can, just because I'll give you a good example. Our purple pumper is a 2003 Sutphen. It currently is out of service because it's going to need a pump rebuild, and that's going to be something probably between $17,000 and $20,000. So currently we're getting estimates on it. That takes time. And it's being replaced right now with our reserve pumper, which is a 2000. The other trucks we have, our engine one is really tower one or ladder one, and it's a 2000. And engine 3 is currently it's 2016 pumper. So at this point, we're really looking at, when we get towards the capital, if we can maybe look at a truck purchase here in the very near future. Other things when we talk about, copier lease at standard, radio supplies and repairs. Again, I have to, when we had our radio grant, it wasn't included for remotes. A remote is sort of like a phone that they're stationed throughout the stations, and the shift commander can answer on that instead of using his portable or running all the way up to the watch office. So replacing those run about $1,000 a piece. So I'd like to get a new one for each station. And we also need to get what they call, we get some feedback on some of our systems, and there's a feedback buster that we can allow. We need one for each station. Those probably run about $800-900 a piece for those. So as you can see, part of what I'm dealing with is not only vehicles, but even with each station. Station 1 is 50 years old. It was built in starting in '73 and occupied in '74. So with that, a lot of the stuff like doors, plumbing, are just wearing out. Some of the windows need replaced. We're replacing a few of them that wind blows right through them. So I budgeted, I forget where I put that at, probably somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000 with each station, trying to do that. And you're thinking, well, that station 2 is fairly new. Well, it was built in 2009. So we're looking at almost 14 years old. Again, we have hot water tanks that need replaced at this point. As you know, the city water's pretty hard on hot water tanks. So we're looking at actually going to a tankless type system, because there's 200-gallon tanks there that 3 guys really don't need. So we're going to go something more on a demand system. Things like small equipment and furnitures is always little things. We've actually converted a lot of our everyday firefighting stuff, like fans, to clear out an area. Sometimes we use fans, to battery operated ones, which move a lot of air. You don't have to worry about a lot of maintenance with that. We've talked about getting back battery operated extrication tools. The 2 sets we have are still in service, but they're getting to the point to where parts are hard to find for them. One set I think is 2009, and another one was 2014 or 15 we got those. We're even talking about battery operated type chainsaws too, to be used instead of having to worry about maintenance. A lot of times when that equipment sits, it's harder to start and operate at that point. We have converted all of our fuel to the high octane fuel, which has really helped out a lot with that. So other things that we're looking at, malpractice insurance, EMT, phones, memberships. A lot of us belong to different organizations. The National Association of Arson Investigators, we have 3 or 4 of us that are on that type of crews and committees. Ohio Fire Chiefs, NFPA. I mean, a lot of times you don't realize how much it costs to be a part of these organizations. For all the fire codes, it costs about $1,600 a year just so we can have the proper coding and copies for that. Turnout gear replacement. We're talking within the next 2 years, about $61,000 that we'll have to replace. Any gear that's 10 years or older needs replaced. It can be used one time, it could be used 100 times, but the one time someone would get hurt, killed, or injured, and they don't have, the right gear, it's old gear, or it wasn't adequate, is going to be a big cost to us. Now, I did apply for grants for that turnout gear, so hopefully we can stretch that money as much as we can. Office supplies, really not a lot of change. Operating supplies, service agreements, we have a lot of service agreements with, like I said, the Lexipol type system, the EladTech, service and maintenance on our generators for each station. Safety DX equipment, that would include anything in regards to them needing any type of the specialized vest, specialized gloves, hoods, anything of that nature. Air mask repair and upgrade. We're trying to upgrade our system of the repair, maintenance, and we have a fit tester. The fit tester, when you wear your mask, it basically can check the efficiency of how well it'll seal. Because if you lose your seal, when you're in smoke, there's a possibility of somebody, getting overcome and dying, basically. The one we have is getting obsolete. We do share it with Copley Township, but we made the decision that we would rather have our own and not share it with anybody, just because of the liability factor. The technicians are certified when they check the masks and they calibrate the equipment in that. EMS supplies, again, $50,000. We upped that a little bit. The supplies, they do get the supplies and some of the drugs from the hospitals, but replacement equipment, if they have to use any type of splints, a lot of times they become obsolete. When we're talking about a lot of the other equipment, drug boxes and that, they usually have a 2 to 3 year life, whereas they just get a lot of wear and tear. The bags that they take in on each run, a lot of times with the airway stuff, it gets set in goo and gunk and that, and they do try to keep them as clean as possible, but this does wear. When we're talking about East Ohio Gas, power, we've had to up that a little bit. We didn't know what the actual cost is going to be for that this year, if there's going to be any type of charge. And then talking about our gas and oil, again, for these vehicles. We ran 5,197 calls, with 4,140 being just EMS calls. And then 1,057 of fires and miscellaneous things, being anything from alarm drops, false alarms, wires down is a big one we get. So things like that are all included with that. The radio maintenance, like Chief Morber said, we pay $12 a radio? Okay, yeah.
I think it's 17 or 18.
Yeah, per radio, per month. So every one of our firefighters has a radio, and it includes the ones in the mobiles in the units. So each one of the engines, trucks, staff vehicles has a radio in it. And then postage. Questions over any of that? Yes.
Thank you. The years you said those trucks are, what's the lifespan recommended or average?
Well, the big ladder, the one up at Station 2, is 95. So it's approaching, almost 30 years at this point. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't go on every single call, but it needs to be ready to go. And a lot of times it will substitute for engine 2. A lot of times when engine 2 is saying going down for maintenance, they'll just use the ladder. And it's usually about 20 years for these vehicles. The ladder you could probably get 25 years out of. But usually about 20 years before, you start getting into the pump. A pump rebuild, like I said, the water, we drink it, but it's very hard on our pumps. It calcifies the inside of the pump. They'll have to take that whole impeller out and replace it. They'll basically take that truck completely apart. We usually don't have a lot of trouble with the motors or engines. You'll see these trucks with 20 years have 20,000 miles, but, it's the engine hours that we worry about on these. So about 20, and in an ambulance, you're talking maybe 3 to 5 years. We'd like to be able to put it more of a reserve status. Hopefully when our new one comes in, it's going to replace a 2004 and a 2009 ambulance that are being traded in.
Are there state and federal grants that we're chasing to try to help our fleet with these, and even the foundation possibly?
Yes, we did, for the 2020 grant for the ladder. Right now, there's 2 grant cycles open. The one has not been rolled out, so for the last year's grant cycle, basically, we're still in the running for a ladder truck. I'm applying this year for the same thing. They said go ahead and apply for it. If you don't get last year's, you can keep in there for this year's. So that is something that, we're just going to keep going for that. For my opinion is probably a pumper is something that we're going to have to really look at and get. I don't want to have these trucks nickel and dime us. 15,000 here, 20,000 here. So those are just things that we've talked about for that.
Thank you.
Sure. Sorry.
I was going to ask about the grants, but I had another question too. You have the levy fund for the fire department.
Yes.
And I know it's for capital, and I know that whatever it is has to be over $5,000, correct?
Yes, and that's on page 91. If you guys want to look at
Oh,
that.
so we're not even there yet.
Yes.
Do you want to go there? Or
But
no?
there's no question. That was the last page. That was the last part on that.
Okay.
Now
All right,
on this one
We'll
here.
wait until we get there then.
Yes. With that, we have, if you start off with the auditor's fees, you come down to equipment and furnishings. We've got budgeted $55,000 on that.
Oh.
What page? 91?
91.
Okay.
Yes.
So just skip 90.
Yeah.
Okay.
Under our bondage, on down under debt surface, 61,500. That's for Station 1 and Station 2. Those will be ongoing until 2028.
Okay, so that's what most of the levy funds, or all of the levy funds are used for.
Pretty much. We
Okay.
usually have between, maybe a little more. We have no debt in regards to vehicles right now. We are holding back a little bit for our station upgrade for Station 1. We've been trying that for the whole year. Mr. Tedecki has been more than gracious in helping us, trying to find bids for it. The first time we put it out to bid it was undoable. It was 4 times the amount that we anticipated. Now, we hope that we've reconstructed it a little bit. We really want to assure that we have the right space in case we have a female, to be honest.
I'm aware of
Yeah.
the upgrades that you were wanting to make there.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, we wanted to make sure that we're able to accommodate, the female if we would happen to hire one. Otherwise, yes, we usually have probably around 55,000 extra in case we wanted to look at another vehicle or whatever.
Okay.
And that could be that could be in conjunction with the grants and that. We, just so you know, we did a grant for a truck. We did a grant for an ATV. A lot of times when we have events, we have to borrow one from Norton, New Franklin, Clinton. They've all been gracious in letting us borrow one. But we'd like to have our own, primarily because we got so much of the towpath going in here. And until you go up and down that, it's hard to, not so much get up and down it, but just to get somewhere quick if somebody's sick or injured or whatever. So that's something that we've always wanted to acquire. And again, like I said, the turnout is a big one. I would just love to get like a $50,000-$60,000 grant so we could start getting a replacement and for our new hirees. I didn't mention it yet. We did hire 4 in December and this month, and we're interviewing 2 more that are in paramedic school that hopefully we're able to bring on. But unfortunately, we're losing 2 in February. Captain Coral and Firefighter Thacker will be retiring. So we're not getting very, very much ahead at this point. But we're not really sure if we're going to have any more retirees or not. There is a few that may or may not. So.
Hey, Chief, you had mentioned that there's 2 grant cycles currently open. How often are there 2 grant cycles at the same time open?
This is the first time they've ever done it. For some reason they've been so delayed in delving out money. It started out with $90 million and they've only given out $5 million. So until it's all given out, so we're scrambling to get another grant in for that. But this has never happened before, and I don't know they could point fingers all they want. It's just not done in the timely manner that you would expect. But. All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. When you said the ATV and mentioned the towpath, is the county or the Metro Park system willing to chip in to help us with that?
I did have Captain Polachek. He's been heading that up, trying to find some granting sources for it. So I don't know if we can't. We don't really. If we would be considered more of a rural area, it would be pretty easy to get. But being it's more of an urban towpath, you're sort of in no man's land with that. But again, we're still putting in for grants and that, and hopefully we can get a partial grant or, we've even checked with the county. A lot of times with the AMHA, they have vehicles. But we were told by some of the AMHA people down there in South Van Buren that they're usually not in good shape, that you'd spend more money in repairs and that than what they're worth. So,
I guess my question with that would be, let's say you were awarded an 80-20 grant, would the Metro Parks or the county be willing to say, okay, we'll pay 3% of your 20%? Has there been a discussion about that?
No, there hasn't, but I can bring it up to my committee. I have a committee that takes care of just vehicles, and then a committee that takes care of the buildings and the upgrades for that. So I can shoot them all an email and see if they have any ideas on that.
Thank you.
Going once, twice, done.
Thanks.
I'm going to go to Planning Department right now. It's on page, tab 4, page 76. So as you know, Pete was appointed by Planning Commission as Planning Director. The thought is to have an assistant planning director and backfill Pete's position, so that's funded in here. The rest of the personnel services are basically the same as previous years. You may see that health and life insurance is kicked up a little bit. If you recall, we were without for a little bit last year in terms of the assistant planning director and also the clerk's position, which were both new mid-year last year. On the operation and maintenance side, you'll see Professional services, kicked up a little bit versus the budget of last year, but lower than the actual from last year. So we have several consultants that help us with the economic development. We talked about that last year. One is an attorney. He's been here before to provide insight. So get a good deal from both consultants, the number of hours that they work and the input and feedback that they give. And also doing business visits and things like that. So we kind of have the back office legal side covered, and also the front office with business visits and other work. Also, some of that money we're looking at art installation throughout downtown in the Arts District. Also looking at kind of to complement the DORA and our lack of width in sidewalks, creating parklets. It's kind of, I showed an example to Councilman Heidick the other week. They have some in Akron and in most larger cities, really taking a hold. It's kind of an extension of a sidewalk, so you take a parking spot and you kind of extend the sidewalk, typically made out of wood. You can put flowers and lights on it, benches, chairs, and it's kind of done outside of a restaurant. So if there's a restaurant without a door, they can still sit there. It's not impeding the sidewalk at all. You are taking a parking spot, but there's a nice buffer between the traffic and people sitting there. And they can eat out there or sit and lounge. If there is a door, like we have, you can also have an area to sit, eat, and have your beverage. So I'm looking at that as well. So that's part of that professional services. Most of the rest of the budget there under operation maintenance is same as previous years. We did kick up at the very bottom there, Arts and Entertainment District maintenance. We've been, we put the festoon lighting on West Tusk, looking at doing something similar down 2nd Street. We've been looking for years of doing something different down 2nd Street. If you look at just the makeup of the two sections, Tusk has kind of the stamped concrete, or stamped brick, which had brick at one time. 2nd Street has different light poles, and it's all concrete sidewalks. So we wanted to do a different type of lighting feel down 2nd. Looked at a lot of different variations, looked at a lot of things, looked at cost, looked at maintenance, looked at operations, all of that. So we think we've got a plan, so that money would come out of Arts Entertainment District Maintenance Fund. Under capital outlay, basically the same. From previous years, you will see $140,000 in the infrastructure sidewalks. Going along with our blitz of downtown, one of the major violations was failing sidewalks. So working with business owners and collaborating with them, we put a lot of money into business sidewalks and helping them out, but also residential sidewalks throughout the city, and also our sidewalks. So that's part of continuing that project or program. So, Mr. Heidick, you will notice I skipped over it. On operation and maintenance, you've got $55,000 there for demolition. I know you brought that up in the past. Throughout the budget, this budget, you've got $95,000 throughout the entire budget, $55,000 out of this fund.
On that, the planning department informed me last year that I believe there were 11 folders ready to demolish. Were those all brought down by the end of the year last year? I know nobody from the planning department's here.
Yeah, Pete went home sick today, so he can expand on this next Monday. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that list that was provided to you, they were all done through the abatement process and all that. Castle came down.
That's the last one for the year.
Yeah, I'd have to get you that list. I'm not sure. I think the vast majority of them were, and a lot of that's scheduling with the demo company. Yes.
I have a question. The $30,000 for the building improvements, they put $30,000 in 2022 and another what building improvement? What is that?
Pete could probably give you more information on that.
And there, I can kind of touch on.
Is that the
too.
ceiling?
So they're waiting, so they actually want to redesign the cubicles in the office, kind of like what we did in the building department.
Okay.
To redo their space, but they don't want to do it until we do the roof, so that we're not putting something new in there and having it leak on. So I'm 95% sure that's what that 30,000 is.
Yeah, I think it's also to fix the ceiling as well, so,
Right, because they have the wall back there too, so.
yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
One more. On the page 76 there, a few down, Community Development Administrator, I see there's nothing budgeted for that. Has that position been eliminated, or I see there's just been some expenditure throughout the past, but then none budgeted for this year?
So that was always kind of a standalone position. And since I've been mayor, there's been, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 people in that position. And that's basically the CDBG person. They've learned the position and then moved on and made more money other places. So when we hired the assistant planning director, we folded those responsibilities in with the assistant. So that's what Pete is doing, and that's what the next assistant will do.
With such low amounts there, I didn't know if maybe that position was being funded elsewhere, or if we just kind of let it go blank.
Oh, no, not, it just folded into the assistant.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, for the next few budgets, we're gonna tag team this here, myself, Mr. Teodecki, and Mr. Shreve. So, please bear with us, but these are quite a few pretty exciting projects or funds that we're gonna talk about here. So I'll go straight to Infrastructure Improvement Reserve. That doesn't help anyone, so I tell you the page number.
Oh, no. All those.
Need a break? No, it doesn't.
Look at mine.
I want to get it done.
I'm good.
We'll go to, the lucky number is 119, tab 5. You want to take this on?
Good evening. I think a lot of these roadway projects, some of which were already passed in the fall, so there's going to be some overlap, but kind of touching upon a lot of the similar type projects in the with the infrastructure. Down in the bottom, the 1.8 million, 625,000. You know, a portion of the Worcester Road West, which will come towards the end of the year. We will owe on all of the federal jobs, state ODOT projects. As we file the projects with ODOT, we got to cut our check for the amount they tell us about. And in fact, I think council next week will be bringing one of those projects to council, where we pass our final legislation. Once it passes, we write a check to pay for that project before it goes forward. So actually this year, a lot of projects are moving towards that direction for a very large infrastructure year ahead. So kind of starting with some of the easiest ones, first one due coming up is 4th Street resurfacing. That's coming up here in March. And that is going to be about a $600,000 project. A large share of that is ODOT paid for, AMATs. We have another resurfacing project coming up in about July for Hoppekin, Snyder, and Norton. that ODOT combined 3 projects together, which show up in several locations here in the budget. And the beauty of that is by combining 3 of our projects all in the ODOT world, it helps get the cost down, because some of your bigger contractors can bid a higher volume, which brings the cost down for us. So we were able to convince them to pull 3 projects together. Yes.
Are any of those gonna have any kind of bike lanes, or just gonna be normal roads?
The answer is no. The project includes a resurfacing and re-putting down pavement lines. It's tricky with bike lanes, because ODOT and AMATs will not ever recognize a bike lane unless you truly have 5 feet additional pavement outside of your area of your lane. So if you have 4, that's still sometimes good enough to ride a bike, but they won't recognize that and put signage up unless you have the full 5 feet. And in addition, they like a 3-foot clear on the traffic side and a 2-foot clear on the other side. So while we like to pave roads nice and wide, still adding in those amenities, is helpful where we can, and we do take a look at that. These do not include that, though. The Worcester State, we're in the process of getting our final legislation for that. That's a close to $4 million project that'll be going this year, and our share is $1.6 million, a local share for that project. That has AMAT's money, and it has state safety money in that, both to fill out that $4 million project. And again, the Worcester State job is about a $10 million project coming up towards the end of the year, and our local share is really $2.5 million of that $10 million project. We have, I think it was passed earlier this year, we do have grant money also for South Van Buren project also coming up in the this year's budget. And we have a couple projects that we're still looking into with some of our engineering side, where we're going after some studies to try and leverage, safety monies at some different intersections. Every year AMATS puts a crash study out, and they pick hot spots around the state. We have several of those intersections and roadway segments here in town. So we're looking at where can we use that data to pull in safety monies. And safety monies is good for us, because it typically pays for 90% of not only the design cost, but the construction cost also. So this year, we're going to be really taking a closer look at that and see if we can't apply for some of those additional monies to help improve our streets and make them safer in future years.
If you remember, these AMATS projects are ones that we applied for 5-6 years ago. And some of them, they're all competitive, so it's not guaranteed. Some of them we had to go kind of testify to the need of a project. So kind of nice to see these finally come to fruition. They're all coming at once, and some of the projects have been moved up. So we've got 6 or 7 projects of AMATS where Uncle Sam's picking up a large portion of that cost. Typically, between our funds, we spend anywhere between $2 and $5 million, depending on residential program or resurfacing and AMATS projects, because we have a few kind of sprinkled throughout the last few years. This year, we're looking at about $21 million being spent on streets this year, starting this year. Some of the projects are so involved, the scope is, that's going to go into next year, because of total reconstruction projects, but we're looking at it's unprecedented, the amount of money that's being spent on our roads starting this year.
And grant money of those projects is $17.2 million in grant monies this year on infrastructure and the roadways.
So that's just leveraging tax dollars for, this money was going somewhere, and without, issue 8, this money wasn't coming to Barberton. So we fought hard for it, so it's going to be nice.
Any questions on the infrastructure? Yes.
I may be jumping the gun here, but the Plan Commission agreed that 3rd Street down here should go one way. Is there anything in this to study that, to do that? And then I have one more after that one.
I believe the roadway resurfacing project is highlighting that street, because instead of just changing the lanes, you really need to do the resurfacing of it and then paint new lines down to the new traffic patterns to incorporate that. And we're also working with McDonald's this year. We'll be working a little bit more with them on the entrance on what would be their west side to close that off, which while we put that back to the lane configuration that we showed in front of Planning Commission, that continues to add additional parking on that side and make it better through that area. So that is scheduled for this year. And the final details to make sure the traffic signs and the traffic signals and everything is coordinated with that is still, hopeful to be a this year project.
And then my second one, and again, if I'm jumping the gun, please tell me to shut up, but the South Van Buren project, is that anywhere in here with what we're doing, or is that going to be in the future?
That's from ARPA funds. So not part of the infrastructure improvement reserve, but ARPA funds. And we anticipate breaking ground this year. So we have a public meeting set up with the residents on that street and all that.
In February. And that not only is going to be a great roadway infrastructure project, but there's significant drainage improvements that'll be happening in and around that area that I think will have a very noticeable effect on flooding down in South Barberton in and around that area when that project's completed.
Well, with the infrastructure, when we go to do that, I didn't know if going down those side streets, if we find something, is that still part of, excuse me, part of that ARPA appropriation? Or let's say when we're doing this and we see a sewer a block and a half up Elson, and we need to fix it, would that still be included in the ARPA appropriation, or do we have money here as a contingency in case we find something?
So this year we hired Thrasher to do a master plan drainage study around that whole area of southwest Barberton. And of that, 4 major projects fell out of that. And we studied every sewer, every pipe, every drop of rain that falls in that area, where does it go? And at the end of that, study, 2 of the major projects to handle flooding is incorporated in the South Van Buren project, because you're already out there doing roadway improvements. It's call waiting.
Is it my wife calling?
So 2 of those projects, because of the nature of we're doing a full improvement roadway job, we're incorporating a very large portion of the drainage solution out in that area. A third of those is to handle putting flap gates, tide flex valves on the twin 60s that feed across into the river, and high flows won't back up into that area. Being that it's a little bit different of a nature of a project, we're not putting it into that. We've got permitting that we didn't want to slow down South Van Buren, so that is a separate project that is underway this year. We've already started the design of. As soon as we can get through the permitting, we're going to bid that project also. So that's 3 of the 4. The 4th project is improvements to what I'll call a lake now, but it's really a high quality wetland east of South Van Buren, north of Eastern Road. And to handle some additional improvements out in that area, really that whole swamp area can be lowered by approximately 2 feet. Don't quote me on that number, but consider that about 2 foot lower. And the very large drainage area that normally drains into that and it fills up and has nowhere to go. Well, now it will have somewhere to go. It'll be used more as a storage area. We'll improve the quality of the wetland out in that area and take care of the water rain by rain. It'll have someplace good to go and actually create a better wetland out in that area. So with all 4 of those projects, the 4th one we're studying to make sure, is there anything else we need to do to make the first 3 projects successful? So that's kind of the last project that we're going to be working on the study this year to make sure all of that ties together. And again, I know I rambled a lot about South Van Buren, but I'm really excited about that project and all the different ways it's going to not only help the roadway, help economic development down in that area, help economic development for those businesses just north of there, to bring the roadway up to a better sense, to bring workers and jobs up from the south into that area and help promote development down in there all at the same time as flooding a very wet area that we're going to be able to take care of a lot of the drainage, all with that one project and kind of spin-offs with it.
So that ARPA appropriation does include those?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mike, you were saying Hopkins Snyder Avenue and Norton Avenue, that project gets started in July. How long do you think that project's gonna last? Because you said, let's see, March was because we're gonna have a lot of orange cones around town. And we all have to be, positive about the orange cones and let them know that it's $17 million came from grants and that. But how long? I mean, are you projecting 6 months for some of these projects, or 3 months, or?
Well, just like our roadway resurfacing project now, each one of those roads, it's hard to say how long they take.
Okay.
So it's a resurfacing. You're going to go out, we'll work with the residents. In those sections, you mill it off, get in their driveways, do the improvements in there, and you're putting back, 1.5 inches of new asphalt. It's the same way, there's just a lot of lane miles in and up in that area. So it's not in your particular house, you're going to be disturbed for 6 months. It'll be a similar time frame, location by location, as we currently do through the resurfacing program.
And that Hopkins Snyder Avenue Norton, how much was that? And you said that 4th Street was about $600,000.
About $2.6 million for those three. And
They don't connect.
that falls into the, I mentioned it starts in July. The federal fiscal year 2024 is when those monies are programmed.
Okay.
That fiscal year starts July 1st. We were able to work with the consultant in ODOT and AMATS to deliver those projects in our calendar year 23. So we've actually moved them up and got them all as one project. And by getting them done early, AMATS rewards you on some of the projects that qualify of giving you, part of your 80-20, 20% local share. They'll give you a reward of a 10% additional by getting your work done on time. So we're actually pulling those into this calendar year and able to hopefully get those, bid and built this year also. 4th Street's in fiscal year 23.
We won't mind the orange cones then, huh?
And these are long stretches too.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
I'd rather say yes to orange barrels than no
Oh,
to
yes.
federal money.
I was never so happy when I came down over Robinson Avenue Bridge and I saw those orange cones. I almost crashed. I was so excited. Been working on that for years. So, yeah.
Mike, excuse my voice, I kind of lost it. Snyder Avenue will be done in its entirety, resurfaced, okay. And plus, we're gonna do that, and Van Buren all the way to Eastern Road. Yes,
The total reconstruction of Van Buren will go only to about Russell Avenue,
right,
but then resurfacing to
Right.
Eastern.
Yeah.
And Snyder Avenue is, yes, from 5th Street all the way down to Hudson Run, 2nd Street area.
okay,
To the tracks.
right. Thank you.
5,500 feet on that one. And I believe that is it for the roadway infrastructure projects, unless I missed something.
No, since you were talking about drainage, if you want to go to page 143 and talk about stormwater. Kathy?
Did you say 143?
143, tab 8.
So on page 143, nothing's really changed from year to year, from last year to this year. But is there any questions before we get into the fun projects on the next page? So the projects on the next page that we're going to be working on, So Todd, do you want to jump into the equipment and furnishings, because that's really on page 144, one of the first items that we get into that has a significant change worth addressing.
Okay, yeah, I mean, so I can touch on that. So the equipment and furnishings is going to be, they're splitting loader. So our loader is aging, so streets and stormwater is going to split that. Obviously, our stormwater maintenance department works out of the street garage. And with that being, they load leaves, which is a stormwater benefit because it's removing the leaves from going down the storm sewers. Long story short, we're splitting that with the street department. So you'll see the other half of that in the street budget. A wheel loader is approximately $230,000 for replacement. We're looking at a machine that's got a 3-yard bucket on it. It's equivalent to everything that we have right now. Also in this, so $115,000 would be the 50%. The other portion of that is a rain gauge for the city building here. So we've got a rain gauge on the top that Caroline uses to monitor storms and to check. We 2 years ago, I believe it was, we installed the river monitor so she can watch the level of rivers. So what's also nice is to have that rain gauge, so now you can tie everything all together. So you can see the rivers rise and drop with river monitors. Rain gauge allows her to monitor the storms as they're actually occurring. The one on the buildings, I don't know how old it is, but it's ancient. She said it hasn't worked in a couple of years. It's something that we've been talking about for the last 18 months about getting replaced. So we added that to the budget this year. So that includes, that pretty much covers all of our equipment and furniture. Any questions on, yes, sir?
How much was that rain gauge that you guys are looking at, range?
So if I'm going to go off of the numbers that Caroline put in here, it's going to be approximately 7,000. No, let's see, 7.
Give me the one.
12,000.
All right.
About $12,000.
I'll
Now I'm assuming that includes some software.
Me too.
and a licensing,
Maybe a best friend.
Because it, and I say rain gauge. So it's not like you can go to, a house, supply tool or whatever, and buy the one that you stick in the stake in the yard, and you read it and dump it out after every rainstorm. This is a computerized, it'll send her the data from the roof right to her computer. I'm sure there's an app that's involved. It does wind speed, it does temperature, it does, trying to think what else. It's much more high tech than just a simple glass gauge.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? Yes, right.
Have we considered partnering with Norton for some of the water issues there for those rain gauges that maybe split the cost, but at the same time inform us both?
That is not something that I would say has been considered, but again, I can have a conversation with Caroline and see if that's something that could be explored. Like I said, though, I know that it's been on her wish list for a while, and that's why we had to do the budget.
Thank you.
And the county has a very robust, stormwater management program that they're using some of their ARPA money for. And we're trying to, they've gathered some of the neighboring communities and have, regular discussions and meetings. And Caroline and I have been attending and starting to attend more meetings with the county to collaborate on some bigger thinking and area-wide stormwater projects that would, be helpful to bring stuff like that up and also, again, support other communities' project, because the water to the north of us, it can be managed better, only helps us. So we want to make sure that as projects outside our area are thought about, that we, try and work with them to support some of the projects as they're thinking through what project's next.
If you remember when we talked, our watershed goes all the way into Medina County into, it goes over there into Medina, past Copley. So we've been, Sharon Township, so you put a little rubber ducky in Sharon Township, it's gonna flow through Barberton. So continue those talks between the county, Summit, and Medina, and all the communities within, to continue to see what we do. But like Mike said, the more water you hold back north of us, the faster we can deal with that falls in Barberton. And that's the biggest problem, not so much what falls in Barberton, but it's 2 days later what comes in from the 5 tributaries from other communities. So if you can hold it up there, we can deal with it better here. And then everyone south of us can deal with it better too.
With no water.
I had a question for Bill. Remember when you had that meeting with the governor? Are they still working with us on flood control and, these issues that we are all involved in?
Yeah, if you remember after the last major flood, Governor DeWine drove up here with the EPA, who just retired. Muskingum Watershed, Army Corps of Engineers, there's probably a good 30 people here. So yes, we're still working with all of them, and all the communities around here.
Okay.
I've spoken to mayors south of us all the way down to Coshocton. Massillon, New Franklin, Clinton, everyone in between. So everyone's dealing with this. It's a large-scale project, so we can only do what we can do right now. It's setting money aside from all these higher agencies. So we kind of spearheaded that. And, I wrote a letter to Governor DeWine. He got in this car, drove up here.
Right.
So yeah, still continuing.
So that's a great segue into one of the projects on page 144, when you see the $350,000 on First Street, Oxbow area. We've submitted and we've had positive feedback. They haven't made any announcements, but we feel we have a pretty strong application in for a $265,000 grant, and we would have a $60,000 match for that area to take that ditch, provide some relief to an Oxbow area, and improve that neighborhood in that area to provide a pretty significant impact. And kind of to tie one of my earlier conversations, one of those 4 recommendations we talked about down in the South Van Buren area, that's the type of project that would make a strong application to the Muskingum watershed to hopefully continue to provide some additional stormwater type benefit in our area. So that's kind of on the plate this year as we research what to do and leverage outside money. Some of the additional things for projects on the wish list is the Houston. We have some about $70,000 price to put in some storm sewer and provide some relief in that area to get rid of. It's a really flat area. A lot of water sits up in that area, and put a pretty small pipe in. We feel we could do that for about $70,000. For Cafferty Park, I think there's some work out there that we should be doing. We got projects out by State Street. We got Grand Boulevard, Wisteria, Taylor Road, Anna Dean Park. All of those, to name a few, are places that we're looking to provide, whether it's with our own crews to buy some pipe and see what we can, engineer some plans in-house, keep our costs down. We're trying to be creative this year.
When you mentioned Taylor Road, when's the water line going in, or you don't know? How did you do on that grant?
So we're still waiting.
Okay.
And we've got a pretty good word, so we're very hopeful.
Okay.
So that would be something that would go out to bid this year and probably start in the fall.
And when it does, we've discussed this before. I know Todd and I have, and I think you and I have, about somehow providing a way for the homeowners on Taylor that are backed up by Norton is their backyard, that they could, even if at their own expense, could get the water up to Taylor and have some drainage to get rid of some of the extreme amounts of water that they get.
Yeah. So that's something we can look at in final design.
I'll keep reminding you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Joyce, yes.
Belts Ditch? Belts Ditch. We've already talked about that before. Belts,
So
I think it's
that's just
Betts, I'm sorry.
a title on there that actually should be removed. I don't know if Jeremy may be able to kind of touch on the titles. I know some of the titles
It's in the time of the previous project.
Okay,
Stay,
so,
so
because
if
you're
you
not
look back
doing
through
it
the work
again,
book.
right?
Right.
Because you already did that one. That's what I,
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was
Yeah.
gonna be my next one.
yeah, I'm like,
Jeremy, you wanna elaborate?
Yeah, but that's still budgeted for 350.
I know,
Yeah,
but
that's
that's
the
what,
one.
If someone were to go back to the
Talking
budget
about.
that's on here, on the computer here, you could see what was spent in whatever year for best ditch. So that's why it's still there, but for our
because
purposes.
that's what you were talking about, the oxbow.
Yes.
Because I'm
Yes.
going, you're not putting that in Bet's ditch. Thank you. Just wanted a clarification.
Any other stormwater projects I'm missing?
No, but we've got money in here for engineering, things pop up. There's a lot of roads like East Houston that there's no crown, it's just very flat, so the water just sits there, which makes it dangerous for drivers. So we're looking at those throughout town. We've talked for years about part of our street resurfacing, about putting curbs in certain places to help direct the water to certain places. So you brought up, is there money when you're doing this project and maybe down the street, just outside the scope of the project, you find something. So there's some money built in and a contingency to find some of these things.
Off Houston, didn't you put a retention receptacle underneath, in that
And it's dry.
triangle? I beg your pardon?
It's dry all the time.
This is closer to 7th Street.
Okay.
So
I know where you're talking about.
water.
Okay.
Yes,
Would we be able to resolve a debate? Is it Houston or Huston? We have the mayor, the service director, and the engineer here.
Houston.
Houston?
It's Houston.
Houston.
Okay. The mayor said it.
H-U-S-T-O-N.
Yep.
And Castle is not Cassell.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I get it all the time. Like, you mean Huston? Like, no, Houston. Just depends on who you talk to.
Right.
Any other questions related to storm?
It's just Bet's.
So we're gonna, I don't know how long you guys want to go, reach the second hour mark, but I do want to hit on rental registration.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna hit on building and rental. Let's go to-
You did the building.
Oh,
not the building
maintenance,
part,
yeah.
yeah. Rental registration is
122.
122. Just so I know that's a fund or program that's not heavy.
So with rental registration, the first positive I'd like to point out is in the revenues anticipation for the 2023 budget. In 21, a total of 123,000 and change dollars were collected. In 2022, we received $250,000 in rental registration. And a lot of those efforts came into play this year with really honing in on following up with every single one. We worked with, law this year, and we worked with utilities to do additional research to go find rentals that were, out there that never either responded or we didn't know were rentals. We've really followed up with them. This past year, we've logged them all into our computer software, and we've revamped it, worked with the creators of the software to bring in some new ways for them to pay electronically, our electronic setup in there. So we have a much easier way for people to come in and pay for it, for tracking. Just this past week, we're still trying to improve even better ways where we're trying to cross-reference potentially with the water department so that if you sell your rental property to somebody else, just when you go hook up the water, it'll trigger a check through the computer to make sure that rental registration has the transfer of property, so we can get a new, request out and continue to track, monitor, and take care of. And again, we're working with law department. We're going to really take a hard look at the legislation again, which will again help us in even 2024 as we continue to become more efficient with how we track it and how we go about continuing. So there's the good news where that's going to get even better. Looking down through at some of the expenditures to help us, track down, provide that. We've even talked about some of the benefits to the rentals of, some of the inspections that will go out and do and potentially even work with the fire department to provide, smoke alarms, CO detectors as part of your rental registration on a new rental. So we're trying to see what that might look like as a kind of a bonus to get people to sign up and bring that to them. Yes.
I was going to ask, when we have these rentals, what is the protocol for inspecting the interior to make sure that everything's, in working condition and what have you? I mean, can you only do that if they allow you in, or can you only do that if you've had a complaint, or how does that actually work? Or when it changes hands, or?
Yes, in part, we would, with a complaint, we also are working hand in hand much better on rentals with the fire department to get in and make sure everybody's safe. And again, to provide these inspections, which, through the rental registration, they're allowing us, the access and into the units are also, what we're going to work towards also even in 2024 to strengthen our ability to make it safe for the rentals. Neighboring communities, we're looking at a lot of examples as to legally how do other communities get in to do those inspections and make the collections and still provide a benefit to the houses, the rentals.
What would be something that would trigger them going into a unit or a home or whatever that's a rental?
Well, property inspectors every day are looking at those, not only complaint driven, but through the condition of the outside and, again, knocking on the doors. So they knock on the door and a tenant will let them in sometimes to look at the condition for us to go in and work then with the owners to get repairs, mandatory repairs done. So that's just one way.
All right.
Sometimes the fact that you've had to pay $200 or whatever the fee is, you want it inspected because you paid it. You feel that you're entitled to an inspection.
And that's where I think it'll be nice too, I believe, as part of your fee, how would we get those without smoke detectors or CO detectors to get them to make the tenant safe? So that's something that's kind of dear to my heart to, get that out in future programs and make that available.
For the rental registration, are the houses that are low-income houses, government subsidized, do they have to register too as well?
Yes.
All right, and you mentioned complaint-driven. Who would they call tenant-wise if they had a complaint about a property?
Let's say somebody that's renting. has a
Renting.
complaint
I
about
get a
the
lot of
place
calls
they're
saying my
renting.
landlord won't fix this.
So there's
Who
tenants
do I
with
call?
rights, and the planning department spends some money to have a fair housing advocate. They put on once or twice a year. We pay for them to come to town and they put on a clinic, but they're also kind of on call. So tenants do have rights, so they can call the planning department or the building department and put them in contact.
Sure. I do want to clarify the first part of what you said. You either own your home and you live in it. If you own a home and you're not living in it, it's a rental.
Correct. I just know when government's involved, a lot of AMHA or whatever, they tend to be they're
Right,
an
so
exception.
you're-
Can I kind of fill in a minute?
Mm-hmm.
If you know it's a Section 8, if you know they're getting a voucher payment, if they contact the Section 8 department with the complaint, they will send an inspector out. If the city knows when that Section 8 inspector is going in, the Section 8 inspector will let them go in with it. But AMHA is obligated to send an inspector out if there's, like a tenant is complaining they haven't had water, or the tenant is complaining that the pipes are always leaking. They send an inspector out, and if the city knows that, they could send an inspector with Section 8. Not that I ever worked there.
knows that.
Any other questions?
That's all we had prepared for today. About 20 funds we went through. Utilities, park maintenance, park admin, and law are scheduled for Monday, the 6th. But if there's any other questions throughout the week, again, let me know. And like I did this evening, I will either email everyone out or like this evening, I'll let everyone know what the question was and the answer. So.
All right, is there any other questions for the mayor, budget-wise? All right, seeing none, this workshop is adjourned at 7:57 PM. Thank you.